I'm going to speak today about the importance of selecting the appropriate contract for the project. As you will notice on my opening slide, I think this is a team effort. This is always a team sport. This team consists of TxDOT districts, PEPS division staff, and external engineering service providers. On this team, we all have a very important role to play, and we must all work together to achieve success. My agenda today consists of a brief safety moment and some discussion on general contract usage. We'll define success and talk about different contract types and terms. We will also discuss the importance of keeping an open mind and a few various comments and some action items for everybody in the room. Our designers are cautioned about the importance of performing a plan-in-hand site visit. We do this to make sure the proposed design elements fit the conditions, and personally, I can say that I've never taken a set of my plans to the ground and found that everything fit perfectly. These site visits are performed periodically during PS&E development and to monitor changing site conditions, refine design elements, and just make sure that we have a constructible set of PS&E. Many times these visits are sudden events. They can happen in response to unforeseen problems, plan changes, questionable survey conditions, among other things. This can lead to a quick trip being conducted with very little advanced planning. Have you ever heard someone say, we're just going to make a quick trip out to the project? Well, our design staff members spend most of the workday in the office, and the conditions on the side of the road present a brand new set of safety challenges. With this thought in mind, I'll present a few ideas we can use to make sure that we all go home the same way we came to work, safe and sound. Consider pairing your designers with an engineering technician, construction inspector, even a maintenance hand who's on the road regularly, especially on their first few trips. Use Google Earth, since we have the technology to review the area prior to going to the area, and look for safe places to park, what's the best approach to the project site. Remember, vertical profile can affect some of these decisions. And we should conduct and document this discussion the same way we do when we hold a safety tailgate meeting. Our construction staff do this while preparing for their activities, and I'm sure it's saved a few lives and limbs. Prepare for any changes, and if you don't feel safe, take immediate actions, including canceling the trip and rescheduling at a later time. So look at that site and use sign setups if the conditions warrant. Many times there are no traffic control devices set up for these impromptu roadside events, and the first question after an incident will be, is everybody all right? The second and the third and fourth will be, do you have your PPE on? Was there any signing? How did you prepare for this trip? How did you document it? Perform and document a debrief after the visit to create some lessons learned. Let your EITs and design staff present these findings at their next office safety meeting. And here's my shameless plug. Let's all work to end the streak. This is a very important thing. And looking at this graphic up here, you'll see, our number one work-related goal is for everybody to go home safely. Vehicle crashes impact workers, their families, businesses, and communities. All workers are at risk whether driving is their main duty or a secondary activity. And between 2003 and 2014, there were 22,000 work-related deaths involving motor vehicles in the U.S. And the cost to employers is staggering. Over time, there's been a steady increase, and I'm glad I line up well with some of the things that I've seen in the previous presentations. There's been a steady increase in outsourced engineering services for TxDOT. We'll look at this for the next few minutes, and as an example of this massive growth, in 1994, TxDOT outsourced less than $100,000 in engineering services. In FY 2000, it had grown to $300,000. Again, in 2007, it had doubled to approximately $650,000, and many of the folks in this room remember what happened in 2008 around the time of the short course. At the beginning of that fiscal year, we had projections to do about $700,000 in engineering services, and at the end of the session, I went back to my office, which is now PEPS, and called all my providers and asked them to turn in all of their work and a final invoice by December 1st. The economy had impacted TxDOT's ability to fund projects drastically. It changed the game for everyone on this team. Since 2008, levels at the department have effectively stayed the same or seen some reduction. The PEPS division was created to manage this enormous program of work efficiently and effectively. Those that understand state government know all too well that with the high volume of expenditure comes a high expectation by our taxpayers and government officials. Everyone expects increased levels of production and favorable impacts to occur as a result of this bigger spend. One of the things I've noticed since my retirement in 2012 is the willingness of the department, administration, and staff to reevaluate effectiveness and change the processes to fit the current conditions. They have been listening to the client districts and modifying their processes, considering increased workloads, accelerated schedules, sustainable funding, and the conditions that are now being experienced. So TxDOT has always been a leader at using innovative ways to deliver transportation infrastructure. Now they are set to take the lead using effective and efficient ways to successfully outsource consultant services. So over the history of this program, from the early 90s to the present time, TxDOT has become more skilled in understanding the importance of effectively using outsourced engineering services. As engineering services continue to become a larger part of the program delivery, I believe all parties will continue to become more adept at using the service. With each work authorization, providers are required to deliver a product. Not always focusing on the product, but the broader long-term solution is another key change I have seen. Since the inception of PEPS division, there has been a push to understand the long-term solution and use innovative contracting techniques to supply the services required. Partnering in the 80s and 90s became a part of TxDOT's approach to working with their construction contractors. In order to achieve successful outcomes, some similar partnering techniques with engineering service providers may be considered. I think some of those things have been mentioned in the previous presentations and they're going on, so these are good things. I think the more that we partner as an industry and realize that our goals are very similar, the better outcome we'll see. In order to drive successful outcomes, we must clearly define what represents success for all three parties of the team. For the districts, it's providing transportation networks and mobility for users in the geographical area. For PEPS, it's effective and efficient contract execution, management, and closeout. For service providers, it's high levels of quality, client satisfaction, and the ability to perform a business service successfully. With this changing environment, the results are always pending. Success is very elusive, and it's a moving target. It takes diligence and constant effort for the team to succeed, so we must all do our part. PEPS has come up with a well-defined prioritization process to determine which work authorization needs to move forward first to accomplish district and division goals. Along with this, there have been some recent changes to the way that work authorizations assignments can be distributed to providers within contract groups. For some time, a round-robin approach was used and work assignments given to the next provider in line regardless of the project conditions or any consideration of project specifics. The feds have suggested TxDOT use a different approach to work assignments on federally funded projects. This involves an analysis to determine which provider from a group is best qualified to perform the services on a specific work authorization, specific project. PEPS must have the final say in regarding these assignments, but clear and intense communication of district division expectations is required on the front end to decide what services are needed. Equally intense communication and discussion must occur with the provider before a final decision is made. Schedules seem to be always accelerated these days. These types of unique conditions must be considered before an assignment is made. Clear communication between all three parties of the team is required. Providers and TxDOT staff must be realistic in determining if the work can be accomplished within existing workloads, and the provider must be honest with TxDOT about whether they can achieve those goals. After an evaluation and selection is made, contract services reviews the results, and a business case memo is typically required to justify the business case as well. Consider whether using an ID or SD makes the most sense. Jeffery Vinklarek will discuss this in greater detail in the next presentation, but make sure the scope and remaining time on the contract is enough to execute the documentation and to accomplish the work. Be sure to review all contract documents and develop a plan to address any holes or needs for supplemental agreements very early in the decision process. Depending on the size, contract revisions can take time and multiple levels of approval. It's also a good idea to establish a timeline first, set realistic milestones and expectations for all parties, then have open, honest communication to make the whole team aware. Try to look ahead and anticipate unexpected roadblocks and discuss them openly and honestly. As we all know, unforeseen project delay combined with accelerated schedules can be a recipe for disaster. For state-funded projects, the assignment process remains the same. In discussions with Jaime during my prep for this presentation, he identified another situation where contract innovation is driving success at PEPS. He described to Jeffrey and me a technique he has used to avoid some common types of delay and confusion at project startup. He called this the mini skinny. Commonly at project startup, the overall work authorization may take a long time and major effort to execute. Many times, some incidental services are needed immediately to help develop a clearer picture of what a concise scope, level of effort, and schedule really look like. And sometimes TxDOT may need the provider to attend meetings and perform analysis before the overall work authorization is executed. A good example of this is the need for a CEI provider to attend the pre-construction meeting and set up mixed designs and testing schedules in Site Manager early. Many times the consultant feels they should do this type of advanced work at risk to stay on good terms with the district client. Another example is a need to gather incidental survey and traffic data prior to determining the full scope of work and level of effort. It's best for both parties to wait until there is an executed contract in place before beginning any work. This mini skinny concept enables PEPS in the district to execute a smaller work authorization initially to perform the required services. This small work authorization size and scope, along with district level approval authority, allows the district to do this with PEP's assistance when conditions warrant to avoid anyone working at risk. In this case, listening to the client, district needs, the conditions resulted in a simple solution that serves all parties of this team well. It turns out in this case it's a win-win scenario. If we communicate business needs clearly and openly, more of these type of situations will occur. We all want and need a successful project contracting experience. Focus on this goal while keeping an eye on the big picture. The solution is not always a product that's delivered. There may be chances to try some big ideas if we truly strive to reduce TxDOT's cost and improve results. Be a leader when it's needed. Lead from the front. Find solutions to keep moving things forward. Our job is to deliver projects. Think broadly and listen to those that suggest innovative solutions. Consider pooling providers for individual districts or groups of districts to use. PEPS can assign multiple firms to districts to choose from and avoid preclusions while maintaining ethical boundaries and reducing procurement workload for the district staff. Look at overall team strengths when assigning work to ensure success. Review the subspecialized capabilities to help enhance project delivery. This flattens the district's preference learning curves and improves efficiency in delivery, and success is more likely as well. Yoakum District recently completed design for 44 off-system bridges and 16 on-system bridges in one example of innovative contracting. According to the district, it was a good way to get a lot of work done quickly. We can probably anticipate more consideration of regional contract usage to ensure TxDOT takes advantage of locally experienced service providers that understand unique district needs. Ricardo Gonzalez and Norma Glasscock have been working in the Fort Worth district to develop contracts with comprehensive services to achieve long-term district goals. This is a great recent example of contracting innovation to use the right contract to fit the real need. Another example is Bryan District's recent procurement. By PEPs listening to their issues and thinking about the bigger picture, they moved from product to solution and determined their real issue was they had 60 bridges they need to get off the deficient bridge list by 2024. The solution was a bridge program delivery contract. Under this contract, TxDOT will assign large groups of bridges and work together with the providers to the 15% mark to get all of their expectations, design criteria, and so forth established. Then after that milestone, the provider will work independently to develop ready-to-let PS&E, including environmental and utility services for the bridges. When the ready-to-let projects are submitted for TxDOT final review and letting, they will have received a solution to their root issue, which was advancing their overall bridge program rapidly. It takes a while to develop a strong contracting culture. TxDOT's well on its way to achieving this goal. It's important to have a client owner that understands contracting as well as the importance of self-performing work. Problems, changes, successes, failures are to be expected as we progress forward and develop this new culture. With thoughtful leadership, I am certain TxDOT will stand out as a front runner in the world of contracting engineering services. We in the industry stand ready to help deliver these large programs of work and important individual projects to the citizens of Texas. Now here's a plug. I know Norma already plugged the PEPS conference, but here's a brief plug for some upcoming conferences that may interest you folks. This one on the top is brand new, I believe, right? It's a brand new type of conference, the first time they've had that this year, and these three are soon to be coming. And here's your homework. Communicate. I know it's easy to say, but when you're dealing with a client like TxDOT, it's the most important thing. They don't know you have a problem. They can't help you solve it, and vice versa. Mentor your staff. Make sure that they understand the importance of communication and the effective ways to do that. There are ways that you should communicate and ways that you should not. Provide honest feedback. Even though they are your client, they are also engineers as well, and the honest feedback is a part of our reputation that we must uphold. You got to be honest with the client, let them know what's going on, then we can solve the problems. And be bold. You know, these times are highly irregular in Texas. We've never had this condition where there's a sustainable funding situation. Need to be bold in how we look at this and the changes that we recommend, and take some calculated risks. Raise the others around you as you rise. And again, one more shameless plug. Let's do all we can every day, every time we get in the car, every time we talk to our friends or our family, to help end the streak. That's all I have. Are we taking questions now? Okay, we'll take questions at the end. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. I guess I'm between now and break, so we'll try to make this quick. So selecting the appropriate contract for the project, I still don't know how I got talked into putting this presentation on. I have to talk with Jaime. I don't know if I'm doing a good job or a bad job. It might have been I'm doing a bad job and I'm trying to learn some lessons from this. So what am I going to get into? Indefinite deliverables versus specific deliverables, pros and cons on those two, and why to use one versus the other, and some of the lessons we've learned in our district and how we kind of proceed with one versus the other. I'm also going to get into building the right consultant selection team, who sits on that team, who to put on it, and why we put certain people on it. So we'll get into that as well. Update on Senate Bill 20. I think that might have came out 10 or 12 years ago, and talk about what Senate Bill 20 said, how it affected people sitting on that selection team, and then the recent changes to Senate Bill 20 and how it actually maybe gave us a little more leeway and isn't quite as strict as it was when it first came out. Number 4 there, I'm going to talk about proposal content versus proposal topic. PEPS recently has changed to go to proposal content versus proposal topic. And that was, I guess, the wave 4 of 2019 is when we went to proposal content. And I'm going to kind of explain the differences in there and maybe why we went that direction. 5, we'll get into lump sum versus specified rate and how we, as the Yoakum District, uses each one and talk about pros and cons on each one of those. And then finally, I'll get into discipline-specific contracts, what TxDOT has procured with these, the different types, and how we foresee those things being used and what's out there. So diving into it, indefinite deliverable contracts, I'm going to read the definition. I didn't know there was a definition out there, so since it was new to me, I'll read it to y'all. It's a self-oriented contract of limited dollar value and duration, maximum 5 years, that includes a general scope of service and uses work authorizations to define the specific project assignment and prime provider's responsibilities. These contracts are focused on a discipline of work rather than a specific project and include time restrictions and dollar amount. So our ID contracts are 5 years. That's how long they last. Work authorizations can only be submitted or authorized within the first 3 years. So that's important to know. They're limited dollar value and duration. So when you go after these contracts, you're going to know up front they're either a $2 million survey contract or a $5 million PS&E, and recently we've bumped those up to $10 million as well. And I just talked about the duration. Those are five-year contracts. Use of work authorizations to define the specific type of project. So after that contract is executed, then the different work authorizations off of that contract will get into the meats of that project as you move along. Focused on discipline of work. These ID contracts, the discipline of work versus a specific project. So these IDs a lot of times are surveying contracts, geotechnical contracts, PS&E contracts, as well as schematic and environmental. Provides flexibility to the district, and as a district, this allows us not to go get a separate contract each time we need a project done. So how in the Yoakum District, some of the things we've done is under that same contract, we'll do a safety job, we'll do a rehab job. We've actually done bridge jobs on these as well as sidewalks. So it allows us to actually be more efficient and not having to go get a new contract for each package. And then expedited contract execution. These are executed fairly quickly because really all you're negotiating is just rate, and allows you to get started on these contracts fairly fast. So you don't get into the level of effort until you get into the work authorizations. Some lessons learned on our recent IDs that we procured is the pre-search on these. So, we want flexibility. I just mentioned flexibility and trying to use them for different types of projects. So we were kind of throwing all the pre-search in there, everything in there, so depending on what we needed, it would be in there for that contract that came up. But it kind of was brought to our attention that maybe that's not the best way to approach these, because what we found out, it was affecting how some of the consultants were building their teams. So some of these pre-search are maybe rare, or everybody doesn't have that pre-search. And so really study those pre-search when you're throwing them in there. Don't say, well, this is an ID, I want it all in there, because it then affects how some of these consultants actually put their team together. And just a couple of them that we put in that maybe we ought to look at next time was a state land survey. And everybody doesn't have that state land surveyor. And how often do you really use that? Terrestrial LiDAR and aerial photogrammetry were a couple of the other ones that and that's what I'm asking, make sure you're looking at those pre-search and not just throwing them in there. Specific deliverable contracts, SDs, these are different than the IDs in that they are developed for a specific project. And what we use these for mainly are your bigger projects. You're going to do that work on that big job. So it's the main thing is on their project-oriented. Definition on these, they're project-oriented contracts that include a detailed scope of service that sufficiently defines a detailed negotiated budget and schedule, as well as the prime provider's responsibility. So in these, you don't know up front the dollar amount as well as the duration. And until you are selected as the provider and start getting into the negotiations of the rate and level of effort, then it defines the dollar amount of that contract. And when you put together your schedule for deliverables, it'll put together your duration of that contract. It's a detailed scope of services. Since it is project specific, all that is in up front. Work authorizations, different than IDs. IDs, those work authorizations have to be executed within the first 3 years. That restriction is not on SDs, and those work authorizations can be released throughout the contract. These take a little bit more time to execute, and that's because you're not just negotiating rates. You're getting into level of effort, schedule of deliverables, so it takes a little bit more time. At the end of the day, these are probably more well thought out projects, and they're your bigger type projects you look at. So getting into building the right CST. Who's on that team? Normally you have a procurement engineer, somebody from PEPS, and then most of the time you'll have 3 members. And as a district, we normally, when we're procuring, we'll have 3 people from our district on there. Who's on that team? Always the project manager. That project manager is going to be dealing with that consultant, that PM throughout the work of it. You want that person on that project. Licensed or registered professional service, we need at least one. I say PE because a lot of times, but it could be an architectural contract, but you need at least one licensed or professional service member on there. And then make sure we're having the subject matter experts on there. Make sure we're not putting 3 EITs on there that haven't been dealing with this work. And it seems like sometimes we see that. So make sure the people we're putting on this team are subject matter experts and have dealt with this in the past, and they know what they're looking for. The last bullet on there is understanding the commitment of time. As y'all heard from these recent presentations, we are procuring a lot of money in contracts the last couple of years, and it's going to be bigger as we move forward. So understanding the commitment to selecting these and not just going through the motion on them is very important. So with that becomes a lot of time commitment. So making sure you reserve the time to do these and do a good job on running through the proposals and rating them. It is time consuming. We ask that you make sure you reserve that and understand that going into it. So a couple of the roles that the procurement engineer has on it, their main role on the CST is really guiding the CST, making sure they understand the selection process and make sure they're kind of following the rules on that. The CS team, what do they have? They actually have to complete a training before they're on that CST. It's a mandatory training for all members. Then they get into the work categories for that contract. They'll develop the scope for that contract. They'll create the scoring grid that's actually used to select that consultant, and then they'll be actually the ones evaluating those providers. So that's kind of the roles of those. And lessons learned from the district on these CSTs, and this is kind of my plug. You know, the first one I sat on, there was 3 of us, and out of the 3 CSTs, none of us had been on a selection team before. And that makes it really tough if all 3 of your members haven't been on it before. It's hard coming up exactly what you want versus building that scoring grid to select them. So since then, and I recommend it to y'all, never have built a selection team with nobody with any experience on it. Make sure you have experience built in that selection team. It's been a huge benefit for us moving forward to have somebody kind of that's done it before and leading the other team members. And then one last thing on lessons learned. You know, after the selection team's out there to consultants, the cone of silence period kind of begins, and the consultants can't actually go meet with the team members and to discuss that project. So we always have somebody in the district that's not on that team that's familiar with the project, so somebody can come discuss that project with them. The good thing about that is if it's only one person, all the consultants coming in that want to know about that project is getting the same information. So that's worked well for us as well. Senate Bill 20. Senate Bill 20 may be a reason we have a rough time getting people to sit on these CSTs. Senate Bill 20, again, I don't know exactly when it came out. I was thinking about 8 or 10 years ago. But what the requirement of Senate Bill 20 was, it said if you sat on a selection team, you couldn't go accept an appointment from that person until 2 years after you left TxDOT. So let's say you sat on, 10 or 15 procurements at your time at TxDOT. You couldn't go to work for any of those firms that you selected during your time at TxDOT for 2 years after you left TxDOT. So it really restricted you if you wanted to go to work for somebody after you left TxDOT. It really restricted who you could go to work for after that. So what the recent change is, it has now been that after you select that contract and it is executed, that 2-year time clock starts then. So it's not over your life of TxDOT anymore. It's over that procurement, and it starts as soon as it's executed. Not after it's terminated, after it's executed. So if you sit on 10 different teams, there's a good possibility at the end of that, your tenure at TxDOT, there may only be 1 or maybe 2 that you would be precluded from. Okay, statement of qualification versus request for proposals. We still do state-funded contracts. They will be SOQs. What's different in an SOQ is that you have questions, and we're going to evaluate each question. So that's still out there. RFPs are evaluated as a whole. It's not questioned. It's based on the whole proposal and based on criteria. The federal requirement for proposals, it specifies the standard criteria for it. And requests for proposals should not be treated like statement of qualifications or SOQs. And as y'all are putting these things together, y'all need to recognize that they're evaluated differently, and we ask that y'all put those together differently because they're going to be evaluated separately. Request for proposal. What is in a request for proposal? I'm going to go through this pretty quick, but as we have moved more to the federal process and we are doing more proposals, and that main reason is for that is to be eligible for federal reimbursement. We want to be eligible for federal reimbursement on these contracts, so we're using the federal process a whole lot more. What is in an RFP? It's the type of contract, ID versus SD, description of services, deadline for submittal, where to submit the proposal package, the work categories, the project manager requirements, the DBE goal, requirements for the proposal package, so the length of the proposal, the criteria and the weights we put on those different criteria is in there. The contents, so we call that the descriptive paragraph in that proposal. So it's kind of leading you what we're looking for in that proposal. And then the selection team and the procurement engineers' individual names are listed in that request for proposal. What is our evaluation criteria? Technical approach, project manager's relevant experience, and key staff's relevant experience. We'll weight each one of these based on that contract, what we're looking for in there. And those weights, again, on all 3 of those will add up to 100. But again, it's per contract, how we look at those. The scoring grid then is built, and the scoring grid, again, is what we use to evaluate the providers. We'll build that based on the percentages we use here. So key points about the proposal. What are we looking for in proposal content? And I want to go real quick in why we went to proposal content versus proposal topic. That's what we've just recently changed. And with proposal topics, you had like 3 different topics versus 1 proposal statement. And what we felt like was going on a lot, they were treating the proposal a lot like an SOQ, and they were answering those topics kind of like questions. And the proposal was never meant for that. Proposal is looking to be one document, the whole package, and we're hoping by going to a proposal statement, so it's only one statement, you're going to build your proposal off that statement and not be addressing topics. Again, it will be evaluated as a whole. This is new to TxDOT. So the CST teams, when you're putting this together, this is something we haven't done in the past. So there is a guidance document that PEPS has put out on their website that will actually help us with that. It gives us examples and kind of shows you what they're looking for when you're putting that descriptive paragraph together. All right, I'm going to rush through. I'm running out of time here. I got a couple more slides though. Lump sum payment. Lump sum is perfect for small projects with a well-defined scope, and we use this when we know exactly what we're looking for. You know exactly the project and the deliverable you're looking for. We end up having a few more supplementals on these is because if it isn't in the scope and you want something additional done, we're hollering supplemental all the time. So we tend to see more supplementals on those. Negotiations seem to take longer. And why would they seem to take longer? We feel like a lump sum project is a little bit more risk to TxDOT. We're paying for one package. The package that we're paying for it all at one time. So we're going to really, when we do those negotiations, dig into the level of effort a little bit more detail. The positive on a lump sum, we feel like there's an incentive to the consultants on these. You're paying them $1 amount for this deliverable. Hey, if you can get it done twice as fast, you're making twice the dollar amount on it. So we think there is an incentive on these types of contracts that is a benefit while we go this route. Specified rate, we tend to use on our larger projects where the exact level of effort is hard to define and the project may have more unknowns. You know, some of our big projects, we design them for a couple of years out there. A lot of times you can't see all the details that's going to be on these larger scale projects. So we tend to use specified rate on these larger projects for that reason. Time consuming for consultant, we understand that. I know y'all don't like them because they're time consuming. They're time consuming on our part too. We got to review those invoices as well. So we get that. Why we use them a lot of times, again, we're managing risk on our end. We just don't know that, so putting it all as a lump sum payment is hard for us. We feel like there's less risk to the department with this type of payment because we're paying for actual hours. The negative on specified rate, I'll bring this up. We feel like a lot of times we could be paying for consulting inefficiencies on this route. And I say that with, if we get something and we make you change it a couple times, 2 or 3 times because it's not what we're looking for, a lot of times we're paying you by the hour, so we pay you over and over and over. And it's hard for us to track where we should and shouldn't be paying for that. So that's one of the downfalls on specified rate. And just my last slide here, these are our discipline-specific contracts that TxDOT has recently procured. They're out there. I won't read through them all, but some of the reasons we could use these. If you're putting together a project that has a bridge on it and you weren't really anticipating having bridge design on it, you can actually get a consultant to come in and actually do that bridge design for you and input it in your project. Hydraulics, you know, complicated hydraulics project, we could reach out and get somebody to do the hydraulic design for us. Signalization, you got a project and you don't have anybody doing the signals on it, you could get somebody to do the signal project for you. Those are some good examples I thought where this could come in and really help you out.